Welcome to Retrained Search, the podcast, where we lift the lid on what it's really like to work retained, discuss the stories we've gathered along the way, and give you all a peek behind the scenes of our amazing community and how they're getting ahead.
There he
Hello.
is. Oh my God, you look so
He's
pro.
a pro.
Fucking hell. Look at that. We're just sat here with our Zoom rooms on, like, at home, and there's Hish in his bloody podcast studio with his big mic on and on.
It's just the office. I've just got it on the mic on the office. Obviously, like you guys do a lot of the training and stuff. So
Yeah, that's like next level though.
My wife walked into my office about 3 or 4 weeks ago and saw me looking at like podcast mic holders, arms, I don't know what you even call it. And her words were, "Don't you fucking dare."
Why?
Why?
Yeah, don't you go putting a podcast arm across our joint office, is what she said.
Right.
Oh, yeah, fair. If it's not your office, then she has a say.
Yeah, she does have a say.
Yeah, I've been trying to remove that say for a while, but it's just increasing. Yeah.
How are we both?
How are you? Yeah, really good, thanks. Very good. It's been so long though. It's been so long since I saw you. I think the last time that I saw you properly, we were like in person in London.
Yeah, probably.
And I think, I can't even remember why or how we'd been at a client site, or I can't remember.
I think we just met to go for some dinner or something.
Did we
I think
meet
it was
to go for
literally
dinner?
when you was like working with IDEX.
Yeah, that's it. Were you working with IDEX too then? Is that how we met? I was trying to remember how we met.
We met at a Power Hive event, and then we worked together on the personal branding stuff.
Yes, that's right. Well, I mean, you were like the reason that I started doing LinkedIn stuff and started doing LinkedIn videos. If it wasn't for you, the world would not have the pleasure of listening to my dulcet tones all the bloody time, as everyone tells me that they see me more than they see their wife, because they see me in the LinkedIn feed so often. Yeah, it's really nice to see you, and it looks like you've been doing some really cool stuff too. So what have you? Yeah, it does. Like Hector, like that's changed, because Hector wasn't Hector.
Yeah, it was called Recruitment Mentors.
Yeah, and it's still the same as in the training platform that's fed by the recruiters.
Yeah, we just moved everything onto like an improved platform. So I sort of coincided that with like a rebrand, and also wanted to make it a bit more clearer from like the podcast, which is called the Recruitment Mentors Podcast, and the sort of online training solution.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for those of you listening for joining us to the Retrain Search the podcast. We don't even we're very good at remembering what it's even called. Hish, you're much more of a pro than us. But we are told that people do listen to it. So we're carrying on doing it and carrying on sharing our stuff. But we've been up since a stupid o'clock this morning. So we're both feeling like it should be about 7 o'clock at night.
Our first webinar started at 6 a.m. this morning.
Oh, really?
Early one. Yeah. It felt like a really good idea at the time of planning.
What's this, what, for Australia or something?
Yeah.
So me and Lou go to Australia on Saturday. We're running an event out in Australia. We're talking at the RCSA's event out in Australia too.
Nice.
Yeah, so we thought it'd be a good idea to do a webinar for all of our Australia listeners, but it didn't feel, as I say, so bright.
It didn't feel like a good idea. Have you been over there, Hish?
No, it's like I had a live podcast event planned in Sydney, but that was the year that COVID happened, so it didn't happen. But I definitely want to make that happen for sure.
Yeah,
I'd love to go over there.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. We've been working with people over there for so long and not been over, so it's about time. It should be really good. So I guess the way that we kind of roll with this is just to let it flow, but we do cover a couple of things as we go through, like what we've been helping people with, and I'd love to find out a bit about what you've been helping people with too. But I thought, because we never talk about market trends and the market itself, I thought you might be a good person to actually do that with, because you get a really good view, because you're speaking to different recruiters and business owners and leaders all the time. What are you seeing in the market? What are you experiencing at the moment?
So the way that I've been describing Q1 to people is I found it to be 50% of founders that I spoke to were having like record months, record quarters, and then the other 50% of people that I spoke to were saying like it was a really challenging period for them. So I found it to be 50-50. I think April, it's been more like 75-80% towards like optimism, positivity, like seeing some really good markers of like things picking up, those types of things. And then 15-20% of people saying it's still challenging. I think the only other thing worth sharing would be definitely the most common industry or niche that has come up that people view to be like, you know, great potential is renewables, sustainability, like that pocket tends to be like a very common area. Then you've obviously AI is getting a lot of funding that comes up quite a bit. I'd say a lot of recruitment companies that I speak to are less and less like local specific, just maybe because of the types of people that I speak to. But I think a lot of companies are thinking about how can we not have all of our eggs in the UK basket. Obviously, for some companies who are local and based in the Northwest, recruiting the Northwest, they might not be thinking how they can do what they do in the Northwest in mainland Europe or the US or whatever. But I do think more and more companies are thinking about how can we diversify, and the most popular area for that is the US. Because the way that I describe it to people is it's just as hard, but the rewards are like 2 times bigger.
Yeah.
So they're probably the things that are worth sharing.
What would you say to that, George? Is that what we've been experiencing?
You spoke to me a couple of weeks ago and said the last year has definitely been difficult.
Yeah.
No doubt a lot the markets have been tough for a lot of firms. And me and Lou always try and remain glass half full, but we've noticed the past month or so we haven't even need to try and remain glass half full. Definitely a shift in tone of conversation, in optimism. People are seeing green shoots. And that kind of aligns, doesn't it, Lou? Remember what that PE guy said to you? Or was it Paul Press spoke to the PE guy?
Yeah, he said, I think my mic is going to run out of battery. That shows you how long I've been on calls for. I've literally done the whole day's work already, and my microphone's going to give up, so I might have to plug something else in. Anyway, the guy said it was at the back end of last year, wasn't it? And he said it's going to be fine. They've just announced a recession. And you might have heard that already, Hish, because you're, you know, the guy who knows stuff like this. But I was like, could you help me out with that, please? And he said, well, as soon as they announce it, it has to be at the bottom for them to announce it. You have to have 2 clear quarters in recession before they will actually confirm that they're in a recession. And by the time they've announced it, history shows that you're on the way out of it. And that was at the back end of last year. And I agree. I've had experienced the same thing in the first quarter, that you either speak to someone that's had a record quarter, or you speak to someone that is crying. I've literally had people crying on the phone to me because it's been so difficult. And I haven't, like, it's been so difficult because it's completely polar. And now is more consistency around people saying that they're winning work again. So I agree. I'm the same as you. And here's where we share a little bit of that good news, because we just take a moment to share with the people that are listening, our listeners, what's been happening. And I'm just going to share my screen for those that are watching the video, and I know some of you aren't, so I'll read it out. Aaron in the Mastermind just announced that he has exceeded his minimum target number for the year. So he's one of those which is smashing it with a quarter to spare in the face of a continuously tough market. So he's done really well. Yeah, this is a lovely opportunity that I've been helping Abhi with. So he says, hi team, just as a background, we do a lot of retained work. I joined the course to learn new things that I might not have tried and to close more deals. The course templates and calls have been very helpful, and I'm thankful. It's all good. I've been pushing a large deal with a $1 billion organization. We've done a lot of work towards it. Went to a trade search, showing multiple discussions, and they've got a referral into the VP of HR. Competitor was Corn Ferry. the executive team weren't keen to use them, so they have got a chance. So he was asking the question, how do we price up the multiple hires, and how best do we win it? So I've been helping him one-to-one, and we're now at proposal stage. So we haven't won it yet, but we're getting there. This is Abby just saying, call was super helpful, terminology you need to use. And say thank you to me because I care about what we're doing, which I do. And then Ross launched his first webinar yesterday, partnered with the International Society of Farmer Engineers, and created a series of roundtables. Ross is also in the Mastermind. The first 3 will be online, and then a 4th in-person event. And just wanted to say thank you to the Mastermind members. Oh, this is a nice one, isn't it, George?
Yeah, Simon. So Simon joined us probably a year ago. He's just rejoined us. He says, having re-engaged with Retrained, it seems the magic has reworked. And in there, we might steal some of that, Simon.
I know.
And on the back of the first piece of work run from a 15+ year contingency client, thanks to my first alliance with Retrained, I signed up again with Retrained, and within days signed up 2 more. Thanks again for the magic.
Very nice.
Works.
Oh, this is the first one, isn't it?
Yeah, this is
TJ?
Yes, TJ. TJ's got a great background. He's a former CHRO, but new to recruitment. Wanted to share that I pitched a retainer to a client on Wednesday. We briefly performed a contingent search in the past, but they hired someone on their own. That person didn't work out, which is why they've reached back out. Happy to share that they've agreed to a 3rd payment on commencement, TJ, not up front, with 2/3 due at the end. Not exactly what we'd aim for, but it's a start, and at least we get to go to the market as retained. They were sold on the idea that we will have the availability and time to dig deeper in our search to find the right candidates for them. Yeah,
Nice.
$1,000 fee. Not bad for your first one.
Really good. So there's a little bit of positivity. Can you still hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Cool. A little bit of positivity to get you through the next couple of weeks. And now here is where we like to share with what we've been helping people with. And I'd love to find out, obviously from you, George, what you've been helping people with, because I don't actually know what you have been doing, because this is usually the only time we actually get to talk to each other because we're so busy. And Hish, what you've been helping people with too. And what's been helping move the needle for people in their businesses. What have you been helping people with, George, recently?
I think in line with the more positive feelings, there's been a lot of delivery going on, which is good because that means a lot of people are winning retaining business. I'd say the big trend that we see when people make mistakes in delivery is they're very reactive in terms of that delivery process.
Yeah.
Just this week, I had 4 or 5 members on the collab call that were having slight troubles in the delivery process, and it all could have been prevented if they'd have dealt with this at the beginning in the briefing call. And you made a point, didn't you, Lou, that we give people the agenda, we give them everything they need.
Yeah, literally a fail-safe way of setting the project up for success in the briefing call.
Sometimes they just need to be bitten on the arse, I think.
Yeah, it's because they don't use it. Sometimes they just don't use it first time round. I don't know, but you probably find the same thing. You can tell someone to do something, but they don't always do it. And you're like, but if you just did this, everything would be fine. Do you have the same sort of thing, Hish?
Yeah, I mean, implementing and embedding training is an interesting one. So it's like an ongoing thing.
Yeah, it totally is. What have you been helping people with? What's been moving the needle for people that you've been working with?
Systems and processes. A lot of companies that we partner with are between 5 and 30 heads, have aspirations to grow. A lot of the time why they struggle to go there, or they're a bit of a yo-yo business that get to certain headcount numbers and then back down and back up, is because they don't have repeatable processes. A lot of the way and how they do things is in people's heads.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think we'll worry about this when we get to a certain stage, but a lot of the founders that I speak to, I sort of say that the best thing that you can do is have, systems and processes for a 15, 20 person company before you're there. That's what's going to make your life a lot easier. So been helping founders think about how they can get a lot of the things that are, in their heads, out of their heads, into, their internal way of doing things, call it a playbook, processes, whatever, but really help them understand how they can get more consistent performances out of their team. And oftentimes it's those types of things that can really help people get there.
And interestingly, that briefing meeting agenda is just one of those. It is one of those that forms part of a process. You put it in and you mitigate the risks of the project going wrong. You put it in, you make sure it's consistent, and you consistently mitigate against the risks. But somebody has to actually follow that process and use that as part of the process. And like you say, that's the hard bit, is implementing it and getting the consistency that you need.
Well, a lot of people don't have systems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. What have I been helping people with? Well, it's funny because it's kind of similar. So the last couple of mastermind coaching calls I've been doing an audit of their sales process and examining, things like the conversion rate, the meeting and pitch to win ratio, and then examining what steps exactly they're using. Because what often happens is they come through the foundation course, they start winning retainers, and it all starts kind of flowing down its own way. And then they're doing things their own way. They're bringing in new stuff, and that's great. They're kind of, building an aeroplane and flying it around, and as someone described it recently. And then when they join the mastermind, they want to go further and they want to improve. But what they've done in that time is like change things, and some things have kind of fallen by the wayside. And, things like sending proposals tends to creep in, and you find that people are sending proposals again. And that's a big thing that I often helping people to take that out of their process, so they're not sending proposals. So yeah, I've been doing audit of process and optimizing, conversion and sales rates at each stage, which has been really nice.
So curious then, what would you say is the most ideal sales process to win retainers consistently?
I mean, it's a big process, so I won't go through it all.
What are the like how many? Because I think that's interesting. Like what are the typical steps? Not in terms of what happens at each step, but what are the steps typically?
Yeah, so I mean, we've just done a webinar on it this morning. Actually, the first thing is, don't do it over the phone. That the first step is actually either an in-person meet or a Zoom meet. That there's a diagnostic, and that's often missed out in a contingent process, like a full diagnostic.
Diagnostic.
So what, a discovery call?
Yeah, because it isn't always the right solution, right? And I think when it's done well, it doesn't feel like a sell. The analogy that I always use to our members is it's like when you go to the doctor, right? When you walk into the doctor, if the doctor didn't ask you a single question and just tried to prescribe you some medicine, I probably wouldn't have much faith in that recommendation. But first, what they do is understand what's going on, what's the pain, how often do you feel it, what are the symptoms. They diagnose the problem, and then they recommend the solution. And I don't feel like I'm being salty, right? I go home and I trust it because they carried out the diagnostic. And
because normally as a contingent recruiter, you trained and you programmed, and I know this because I was too, and Jordan knows this because so was he, to go in and find out the need. What do they actually need? How many do they need? How often do they need them? And what's that going to look like for us in terms of future opportunity? And you're not actually trained to go back further than that and say, well, hang on, before we go into the need, tell me about, well, you first as a person, and how you are where you are, and what's working well for you, but also the business, where are we? And sometimes you get that. As you get better as a consultant, you get good at doing that. But it's the diagnostic around talent acquisition that you very rarely do as a contingent recruiter. So how are you getting on from a talent acquisition perspective? How is talent acquisition going for you in general? And then diving into what works well, what doesn't work so well, what methods are you using, what processes are you using, what's working and what's not working, and finding out. And then you get a mixture of responses. Some they try to do themselves, if they're small businesses, some they're using their networks if they're startups, and some have maybe started to use agencies. Big companies, they've got a PSL and completely different. But the important thing is like what the diagnostic around what's working and what's not working, because there's always problems. And in the difference in the retained solution cell is identifying the problems in the talent acquisition process in general, not going straight to the need and then finding out what they need and then sending CVs to it.
The best example of that, Lou came to a meeting with me when I first started working with her, and it was a division of Bosch. And I'd worked with these guys for like 3 or 4 years. And every time I'd just taken the brief on the specific role that they needed help with. And Lou came with me, and kind of demonstrated asking these deeper, more strategic, consultative questions. And within 20 minutes, it was like, yeah, so basically every year we have to hire 60 graduates and we have no idea how to hire them, where to start. It keeps us awake every night. It was a huge piece of work potentially. And I'd spent 3 years not even knowing that was
and that wasn't the requirement that we went in to go and talk to them about. We ended up with that requirement on a retained basis because lo and behold, in the past when they'd gone to market for that position, it hadn't gone particularly well on a contingent basis. So it didn't make sense for us to recommend that route again. But if I'd been a contingent recruiter as I was trained originally, I would have taken that requirement and said, yes, we can do better than all the other agencies just because we're better, and gone and send CVs to it, and not identify the bigger opportunity through the bigger questioning, or the fact that every time they go to market for that position, they don't have a particularly good time. So I wouldn't have been able to convert it to retained. So that's just one of the steps in the process. I mean, it can carry on.
I'd actually argue great contingent recruiters do that.
Yeah, some of them do. They find out about the business and they find out about the person. We normally find that the questions around the methods that they are using are the bit is the bit that's missing. So how do you go about talent acquisition? What methods do you use? What works well for you? And then diving even deeper into the methods. So they say, oh, well, we, these kind of positions we take to market directly and we advertise and our talent team does it. This kind of position we use agencies. And then, great, how does that go for you? What works well, what doesn't work so well? And you get a kind of mix, normally a mixed bag there. Some things are working well, some things aren't. These kind of positions are quite easy. These ones are quite hard. Tell me about that then. What are the challenges you face? Well, it's difficult, it's tight, its skills are short, it's competitive. And how do you get on with positions in that space? Well, they take a bit longer and it can be difficult. We get offers declined. And do you mind me asking what basis you're engaging with the agencies for that type of appointment? Those are the questions that contingent recruiters tend not to ask. And that's the difference, because that's when they say, oh, well, what do you mean? And you say, well, are you retaining them? And they normally go, no, because clients look at you like you're an idiot if you ask them if they're retaining at that, particularly at those levels, which are normally not very senior. And then they've just told you that they're struggling with it. It's difficult. It's taking longer than they need. And they're using a contingent model. And that's all I need then to be able to think, okay, well, I can see what's happening here. The contingent model is falling over where it gets difficult or niche or challenging or whatever, because contingent recruiters are only able to go so far because they don't have any financial commitment. So when it gets really difficult and messy and tough and aged or unappealing, unattractive, they start to kind of lose they'll move on to something else.
I do agree with you. So there are some great contingent recruiters out there that are really consultative, that ask great questions, that build great partnerships. I think for me, you can win contingent work without doing that.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to win consistent retained business.
Yeah.
I'd almost argue it's impossible to win consistent retained business if you're not having that consultative level of conversation and carry out a diagnostic.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with winning contingent work and working contingent. Like I think that's cool. Lots of people love it. And there's loads of positions that it works perfectly well for. But some people want to do something different. And if they do, then that is one of the things that changes the path of the next bit of the conversation. Because it's much easier for you to be able to say, okay, well, all those positions are working fine on a contingent basis, but you've just explained to me that these aren't. And I want to help you with what you're really struggling with. So I'd like to help you with that. Let me walk you through how I'd like to do it. You see what I mean?
And then handle and then propose.
And then I'd use visuals. A lot of the difference in the way that I've found it more effective to pitch for retained work and partnership in that way is using visuals rather than just talking at them.
People don't buy what you say; they buy how you do it. Like that, a lot of people, a lot of recruiters are like just talking about what you do. They don't talk about how. But the reason why I mention that is because a lot of the recruiters that we have deliver training or have on the podcast, a lot of them don't do 100% retained. And a lot of them, because they've been doing it for such a long time, over 5 years as a minimum, is typically the types of people that I'm speaking to or working with or whatever. They do what you're talking about. They just don't package it up as retained, which I just find interesting because they've got the relationships, these types of things, but they would have done all of those things or got better at those things over time. They just,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people get comfortable with how they've worked with companies and how they've always done it. So then to say, hey, Louise, we've filled every single one of your last jobs or 90% of them, and we've done it this way. Well, actually, I want to talk to you about, we can still have the same, outcome, but I want you to pay me differently or whatever the blocker is. I do
Yeah, but
tend to
that's
find
not
that.
what I would do. And I agree completely that, especially after 5 years, you're in a groove of what's working for you. And I was exactly the same. Like, I think I was pretty good at contingent recruitment. I was a big biller. And so, the only reason I got fed up with it was because I was tired, because you have to work a lot, because you work on stuff that doesn't result in a fee. And that was one of the biggest changes for me, that I really liked working on stuff that I knew was going to result in a fee. But there is a bit of a step change in that. And you can be really consultative and then just take the brief and just go and work on it as you normally would. And the step change is, well, hang on a minute. Okay, we've filled 90% of your roles and that's been fine. But what about those 10% we didn't fill? Why didn't we fill them? Like, what went wrong there? Because those are the problems that we can solve when we partner on a retained basis. All the stuff where it's working well, I would say, like, there's no reason to change it. There is a reason on our side. There's got to be a driver on one side or the other. Either the client is saying, this isn't working for me and there's 10% of my roles aren't getting filled, you need to fix it. Well, great. That's why I'm here. I feel the same way. I'd like to fix it. Let me show you how I can fix it. That's easy. And that's almost always the best way to get in with retained, is to solve the most difficult problems that aren't being solved with the contingent model. Instead of ignoring that 10% and going, yeah, great, we're filling 90% of your roles, you go, we're filling 90% of your roles, but we're not filling 10% of them. And we want to fix that. So let me show you how we can do it. Or the other driver is that it's working for the client. The client's perfectly happy with what you're doing. And maybe you're filling 100% of the roles, but you're killing yourself in the process, because you're having to put all your time and energy and effort. And if at any point that client says, actually, we've got a recruitment freeze on, you've got nothing. You've had no investment and no commitment and nothing to safeguard the time that you've put in. If they give you a position, you work really hard on it, and then they say, actually, just stop there, put a pin in it, it's risky. And so that's the kind of conversation that I'd lead with if it's that situation instead. Look, are you happy with what we're doing? Yes, brilliant, keep doing it. Yes, I want to keep doing it, but here's my problem. I'm in a position where I'm taking all of the risk on every single time that we work together. And it's getting harder and harder in the market, and I'm putting more and more time in. So I'm not suggesting I want to charge you more money, but a slight change in the payment model will enable me to carry on delivering the same service to you.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Emphasis on the client, right? The emphasis is, I want to keep delivering the level of service you've become accustomed to. That's the reason I want to make this change, not for my benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you mind if I ask a quick question? Sorry.
No, of course not.
Because I really agree with you on the diagnostic as being like one of the root causes, like one of the things that you can fix that, like, downstream from doing that right, can result in the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, because like you said, that's often sometimes what's missed when you find yourself speaking to contingent recruiters that want to make the change, that they don't go that extra level.
Yeah.
So just curious to get your take, because that's how I like my sales process in my business is that you have that diagnostic phase. Because how can I say that what we provide can help you if I don't fully understand, how we've got to this point, what's worked, what hasn't, like these types of things. But what have you found to be the most consistent, compelling reason to say to a prospect, to say to a client who has become accustomed to speaking to someone, it's fairly transactional, yep, send me some CVs, we've got live vacancy, blah, blah, blah. If you then try and get extra time from them, or, you're trying to get them to give you more time so it's in their interest, like for the diagnostic. What have you, I'm just curious, like, because I often run into this when I speak to people, like, how have you, like, what's the compelling reason for Lou,
the one
busy
that
hiring manager?
I end up at, the one that I really end up at is, are you getting what you want when you want it, and is it an enjoyable process?
So
because if you are, those are the three things that when you strip all this other stuff away that I'm trying to find out, those are the things that I want to know the answer to. Because if they're getting what they want and they're getting it when they want it, and it's an enjoyable process, they should carry on doing it, right? Because that is so rare in recruitment. It's so rare. I've never met anybody that says, honestly, that said yes to those, all of them.
Just asking those questions.
And that's when you can get under the skin of, they normally laugh at you when you ask that.
Yeah,
I mean, definitely make you stand out.
Yeah, I've always positioned it slightly differently, Hish. I've always said at the start, anytime a customer engages me with an opportunity or they need my help, I say I work with my clients in different ways depending on the circumstance and the opportunity. Thank you for thinking of me. Let me reassure you, I can absolutely help, but I need to understand a little bit more about the situation, what's going on, how you've dealt with this type of challenge in the past, so I can ensure I recommend the right solution.
Yeah,
I
nice.
need probably 30, 45 minutes of your time to make sure I really understand what's going on here, and then I can recommend the right step forward.
Yeah, I really like what you just said, Lou. Do you know what I also think is a solution to this as well?
What?
Being willing to say no.
Yeah. And being willing
Like,
to say, oh, it sounds like you're having a great time. I don't want to interfere with that. You know, you should carry on doing what you're doing. Very best of luck. If you struggle or you find that you need assistance, you know where I am. And they're like, well, hang on a minute.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you ask those questions, they answer exactly how you expect, and they still go, no, sorry, I can't give you the time. Then it's like, are you brave enough to go, okay, well, sure, it sounds like, you know, you're not really motivated to change, or you may not word it like that, but like, you know, if we're not able to do this, I'm probably not going to be able to help you offer the best solution. So walking away from that is super powerful. And I found that the best recruiters say no more than they do yes.
Yeah.
I remember when you trained me, I remember sitting in the office and you saying, yeah, just walk away and tell them no. I was thinking, this woman's crazy. Telling me to say no to everyone. And yeah, as it happened over the next few weeks, they all started coming back one by one.
Yeah, they do. And what often happens when you say, that's fine, you're getting what you want when you want it, it's an enjoyable process. I don't think that we should interfere with that, or anybody should, because it's obviously working for you. They're normally like, well, hang on a minute. I mean, that's not to say there isn't room for improvement. You know, there's always room for improvement. And then you're like, okay, right, well, tell me about that then. Where is there room for improvement? As soon as you get that chink where there's room for improvement, then what I won't do is just be another supplier. Well, we could always do with some extra CVs in the mix. No, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So what do we talk about now, George?
Sorry, I know you went. Sorry, I know I was asking you questions there. Sorry, I was just interested. I spoke for a while, so I was curious. Sorry, I can't help it.
That's all right. Okay. That's okay. Oh, your sound.
Is it my sound? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
So, your TikToks come up all the time on my TikTok. And
I'm going to let my colleague Matt know about that, because he's in marketing.
Great, right? Really, really good. And the impression I get is that of all the people you have on, they're obviously all top performers, and actually they'll work in different ways. Some do some retain, some do fully contingent, some spec out candidates, different approaches, right? What's the common theme you see across all of them as top performers?
So yeah, I'd agree that they all have their own flavor of doing what they do, but I'd actually say most top performers do a lot of the same things, but maybe talk about how they do it slightly differently or whatever. I'd actually say that there is a lot of similarities.
Right.
So a couple of things. I'm sure you run into this, but I think maybe the first thing to talk about is like business development, consistently winning, you know, clients, these things, because that's the most common skill gap that we're helping our customers with. And I'm sure that often comes up time and time again for you guys in terms of like, what are your biggest challenges, issues, et cetera, is having a consistent pipeline of jobs that we know that, you know, we can fill or place or whatever. So I'll be honest with you, I do think consistently the best recruiters I've interviewed or met or worked with, firstly, they actually truly understand what their ideal client looks like. A lot of recruiters don't. Like, if you were to line up 10, 30 recruiters at random and say, talk me through what a dream client looks like for you in your desk, in your niche, you'd probably be surprised how many people couldn't break that down, like clearly, concisely. They understand like the issues and problems that, these companies have beyond the vacancy, beyond the job at hand. Like that is the most common thing. Like they do really try and, understand the impact that not getting this person in or people in will have on the business, and what it will mean if they do get them in. I think the best recruiters to build on that would describe themselves as problem solvers, and they sell solutions. That is, again, really common. I think the biggest billers on my podcast don't do ones and twos, or like they do fewer of those. Like the most common thing I've found is that these recruiters have landed some big accounts, some big enterprise juicy accounts that they've really worked hard to get around in that business, meet different stakeholders, get introduced. And that's then helped them build a huge contract book where they have 20, 30 contractors in that business, or it's meant that they've then won, multiple hiring projects for the business over a long term. So I do think the best recruiters think about what they do in that way, or at least working towards that. I think then when it comes to like the candidate side, actually, sorry, final bit on the BD side, I would say that they're very aware that like it takes multiple different ways to get in front of like their prospects, so that they don't get complacent with doing what's always worked for them. So I'd probably say that most great recruiters will describe their approach as a multi-channel approach. Like they use the phone, they email, they send LinkedIn voice notes, they send, Loom videos or whatever. Like they have a multi-channel approach towards getting in front of people. And then what underpins that is a process. So like the best recruiters will have a process. So Lou is on my target client list, and over the next 6 months, 2 weeks, 12 months, this is my plan to get a meeting with Lou or get in front of Lou. They're not just like, I'm doing BD on Tuesday, and then they're sort of like a rabbit in the headlights. They're just like, I don't know, just calling their hot leads list or whatever. Like they have a strategy, and that strategy probably falls into a few different buckets. One being like, where could I get money quickly on the contingent side? What are the hot leads? Where are live vacancies now that I could get stuck into, that I could make some money? Who are my dream clients? What's my sort of medium-term, long-term strategy for those clients? And they have different buckets and different processes for that. That comes up time and time again. And then the candidate side, again, it's a bit similar in terms of they have a process around how they tap into these networks and, engage passive talent. They're not just reliant on in-mails, or they're definitely not just posting jobs and, going through that. Like they've really tried to understand how they can get in front of these people, and they play the long game. So yeah, like there is a lot of like similar things. And then if you do all of that right, you're getting referrals, you're asking for referrals, you get introductions, and it's a flywheel.
Nice.
Very nice. I love it. So tell us a bit, will you tell us a bit, are you happy to share like a bit more about what Hector is for our listeners and how it works?
Yeah, so Hector in short is an all-in-one training platform that is powered by current top performers. So where we typically find ourselves helping growing recruitment companies is reducing the time to competency. So that's typically, can we help you reduce the time it takes for your new hires to do their first deal? Can we reduce the time it takes for your consultants to get to profitability, which typically means that, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but a lot of companies that I still speak to mainly operate in a 360 way. So can we reduce the time it takes for people to do their first 360 deal, or consistently every business does it differently, but like what is deemed profitable? Like when is Lou, the recruiter, profitable? Is it that she's doing, 1 or 2 360 deals a month? Is it 3, 4, whatever? But normally we're helping companies reduce the time it's taking to get to profitability or competency. And then the other thing, because of the size of companies, is then how can we take on some of the heavy lifting of upskilling, developing, coaching their teams, so their founders, the team leads, the billing managers can spend time or have more time to spend on high leverage tasks. Like, do we need to diversify our client base? What's our strategy to do that? I haven't got enough time at that because I keep getting pulled pillar to post with Lou, my recruiter, that's struggling or whatever. Like, can we take on some of that heavy lifting so you have more time to spend on those tasks that are going to have 80% of an impact? And we do that through training and development. We deliver it in 3 ways, probably a bit similar to you guys in some ways. So the first way is we have a growing library of bite-sized courses. So they're no longer than 30 minutes, really easy to fit in a working week. And then we have live masterclasses. So a bit like this webinar style where they're a lot more interactive. And then every quarter we have a face-to-face learning event that our customers can put their teams onto. So we've got the sort of 3 pillars. And the big mission, I'm sure you guys will resonate with this, but the big mission that I'm on is I really want to move the needle on changing the way recruitment is perceived in society. And I think how we can move the needle on that is by making training and education accessible to everyone.
Yeah, very nice. I like it. And we're on a similar mission, because working in partnership on a retained basis to solve the problems where the contingent model doesn't. I don't think it should replace contingent. I'm not one of those purists that think that everything should be retained, but it does improve your client partnerships and deepen that relationship, and therefore improve the perception and the industry,
the service levels.
Just by applying the right solution, at the right time. And do you still do some personal branding stuff? You're so good at that. I mean, that probably runs through everything that you're doing. It's listening to you speak about recruiters that understand and truly understand their client and their challenges. I mean, that was one of the first exercises that you did with my business. Who are your target customers? What challenges are they having? How do we speak to that through what we're doing on social media? And how do we get them to see that we resonate on the same frequency? Do you still do work like that?
I don't know. I don't, but we have training from recruiters that would, rather than me.
But I bet it does run through everything, doesn't it? From a business development perspective, it kind of underpins the whole strategy, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds basic, but like I said, how can you build a business, create the right solution if you don't truly understand who that the problems of the people that you're solving that for, or who you're trying to, get in front of with your content, you got to reverse engineer it from who can you actually help?
Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. And I think we sometimes talk about something controversial just before we finish. I don't know whether I've seen anything controversial recently, though.
What, on LinkedIn?
Yeah, we normally pick up on something that's a bit controversial and have a little unpick of that. Have you seen
okay, so let me throw this out there then. You can tell me what you think.
Yeah, go on.
So it's something that come out of a recent podcast episode, and it really got me thinking. It's so easy to compare yourself to other people. And what are we doing, or what can you do personally, consciously, to make sure that you're not being pulled in all these different directions because of what you're consuming online, particularly LinkedIn? I run a recruitment business, and I see on my newsfeed every time I go in there, people having record months, record quarters. And I'm thinking, we're not having that. What's wrong with us? What are we doing wrong? Am I in the wrong market? Are they doing things better than me? They're doing things differently. And I just think I'm very conscious of, although, I want to try and inspire as many people as possible and share things that are really helpful for people, but I've also got to be aware that could the content be pulling people in those different directions that maybe they shouldn't be going in, or be aware of that. So I don't know how you guys think about that, but it's very easy to compare yourself and how you're getting on. And I think what you need to get good at, which I'm always trying to make sure that I do. Some months I do a better job of it than not, but I think it's really important that you have the self-awareness to know what you want, or what is important to you. Because I think if you just log into LinkedIn every day, you could very easily be, persuaded maybe in directions that aren't actually true to you and what you want. And it's really important that you understand what that is. I think LinkedIn
tough, isn't it? Because I think we like to try and share positive news when we can, but we like to do it in a way that just encourages other people and shows them that it's possible.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that LinkedIn isn't the truth, because it can work the other way too, right? Like I was talking to Lou earlier this week, and I said in April we're about 700% up on where we were last year.
Yeah.
Our last April was an absolute shitter, right? It wasn't good, right? But actually, we kind of reflect the recruitment industry in a way, as I'm sure you do, right? In terms of when the markets are good and they're picking up, we're busier, and when they're struggling, it's a little quieter. I was hesitant to put that out there because I don't want to sound like an arsehole, right? I don't want to sound like I'm just being braggy, but actually, so I think, yeah, it works both ways. I think some people are scared to share their wins and successes, and some people
Yeah, some people really are very scared to share their wins and successes and are nervous of sounding boastful or braggy, and some people just aren't nervous about it at all. I think what it's so true what you say, but there's a few things like wrapped up in there for me. One of them is I always remember that visual of I don't know whether it's below a waterline or a circle of all the things that are shared on Instagram or on social media. And then there's like a really small dot. It's like the things that are true.
Yeah.
And the things that you don't share. And it's LinkedIn's the same. Like, who's gonna put out there that, you know, I'm on the verge of bankruptcy and divorce as a result of my failing business? It's so shit. Like, that's just not what people are going to share, even though it stuff like that is happening and people are having a really hard time. So you only see the really good stuff. And so I'm with you. It's all got to be taken knowing that 50% of all the stuff that gets shared isn't shared, is not as rosy as the stuff that gets shared, and knowing that it isn't the truth. There's loads of people having a really hard time too. And then the other piece that you pick up on is, you know, knowing what you want and trying to stay focused on what the life that you want to create for yourself. Yeah. Not a life that you believe you should create because that's what other people are selling the dream on, that they've got a fancy car or, you know, a house in Spain or whatever, or a boat or whatever it is that they're doing, and thinking, well, that's my success and I need to get there, and at that point I'm going to be, you know, successful or fulfilled. And I think it's very hard to stay, you know, all their growing businesses. A common one for me is I get people coming into my mastermind going, I really want to be really good at this and I want to build a profitable business, but I don't think I want to scale. And I'm like, that's okay. Just because everyone else is scaling doesn't mean you have to scale. Like,
as a common one.
And being able to, and I think the older you get, you know, I'm older, the clearer that becomes for what you need and what the life that you want to create, that's going to create the contentment for you. And it makes it a lot easier to live into that, because you can kind of stay blinkered to, yeah, okay, he's got a boat, yeah, okay, they've got a house in Spain, yeah, okay, they've got whatever. I don't need that for my happiness and my contentment. I know what I want and this is what it looks like, and I'm living into that. So I agree with you. Like, the earlier that you can get to know yourself and what feeds your soul and what fills your cup and makes you content, the better. And the more you can live into the life that you want to create and not get distracted by people scaling businesses and doing the things that actually aren't the things that are going to make you happy, the better, and the more fulfilled that you'll be.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd, sorry. I was gonna say, I don't know if you'd resonate with this, but yeah, I've just been thinking about it quite a bit. And like, whenever, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but whenever I felt like really low levels of motivation, or I'm finding it really challenging, it's often because the last time I sort of recalibrated or looked at what I'm doing, what's important to me, it's been a little while. So I think that's the other thing that I'm being mindful of, is making sure that I make myself aware of what's important to me in these things. Because you can find yourself just going about day to day, thinking about the challenges right in front of you, you know, those types of things. And, you know, not look at like why you're doing what you're doing and check in with that. So I think that that's something that I'm looking just to sort of bake in, you know, my weeks, or at least, you know, at the very least my months of like, you know, why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I focused on? Because as soon as I come back to that, you just feel like lighter, and you feel like, yeah, I'm on the right path. This is what I'm doing. And I think the other thing that really helps me, I don't know what you think about this as well, is just remembering that now isn't forever.
Yeah.
I say that to founders a lot. Like, even though, and I'm sure you've felt this, Lou, in your business, that even though you've been called Retrained and that's the name that stays at the top of the door, you can actually have entirely different businesses and it still be called Retrained. So I think that's the other thing to remember as well. Like right now, over the next 2 years, if you have a young family and you want to be really profitable and you want to take dividends out and that's important to you, that doesn't mean it's going to be like that in 5 years. Like you can, I've literally spoke to people where it was like 4 people, and then 10 years down the line, there's a 30-person company. So like remembering that like now isn't forever. And that also, if I'm honest, like excites me, because like you can have different businesses within the business, even though it's still called the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reverse is true too. But
yeah, if you go the other way, yeah.
You see people at really interesting points of change, don't you, when you work with them in that way and the decisions that they're making. And quite a few people I've met had doing it, you know, done it the other way around. Have had bigger businesses and learned through that wasn't the route to their happiness and their contentment, and gone back from that under the same banner, under the same business, and now on a path that's true to them. And they've been down that path, you know. When you're early on in your career, then you haven't been that way, and some people need to go that down that route and then go, actually, oh God, you know. I remember one of the guys that we did you work with Sam Ovens, or did you know did I talk to you about Sam Ovens, Hish, when we first started?
I know who he is. He's like the king of information businesses. He's like,
yeah, he is a king of information businesses. And he went down that journey too, because he got to like 20 million. He scaled and he had this formula and this process, and it was fucking unbelievable. And he had the, you know, the houses in wherever he is, Miami, and the boats and all the rest of it. And he wasn't happy. He was really unhappy. And he completely dialed it back, cut the team back to like 4 people, went back to like 4 or 5 million. I mean, that sounds big to some people, but in context of where he had been. And yeah, I think it can take a bit of a journey to find, and that's life, isn't it? That is life. That's our journey, is to find out what is the path that to the route to filling our cup. And sometimes you have to go down the wrong ones, and having that flexibility and that approach that you've just shared, like now isn't forever. I think that's so helpful to, like you say, make you feel lighter about the journey, and not worry that what you're doing now doesn't need to be what you're doing, and probably won't be what you're doing in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. So I love it. I love it. But George, you were about to say something too.
I was going to say, I remember a few years ago, this was back to the kind of social media piece and seeing what everyone else is posting and thinking about, how should I be doing it differently? Should I go in that direction? I just remember when I had my cancer, I worked with a mindfulness coach for 6 months. And the one thing he told me every week is control the controllables.
Yeah.
And in everything we've just talked about, the only thing you can control is yourself.
Yeah.
And how you process that information and what you choose to do with it. So that would be how I'd approach that, I think. Control the controllables.
Easy to say, sometimes hard to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm big on that. That's very much aligned with myself, stoicism, and like I really like stoicism. That really resonates with me. And like, yeah, I actively don't read the news because of that as well. And these things. So it's just like, yeah, it is interesting. And the same as well, when we started this conversation about the market and these types of things, it's like, I don't know, like how helpful, obviously it's good to be aware of it and understand, you know, macro things that's going on, but how does it help me really understanding the intricacies of the current economic climate when I'm on a discovery call with a recruitment business trying to figure out if our product can help them? It isn't. I can't control that.
No.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's the main reason we don't really talk about it. But it is helpful to just have a brief conversation with you about it, because it's interesting occasionally to put your head up and go, okay, well, is everyone else kind of feeling the same? But I agree. I don't read the news either. I don't watch the news. I don't
I don't involve with it. And weirdly, more and more, the more people that I work with, the more I hear that now. In fact, my coach, Rebecca, said to me today, she doesn't watch the news or read the news either, because I don't think it is
I've heard
helpful.
people call it news sober.
News sober.
We've said that on podcasts before.
Oh, really? I like that.
I've been news sober for 3 years.
News sober.
I've heard people say that on the podcast.
I'm news sober, but I'm a TikTok addict instead.
Yeah. Actually.
That's fine. That's different. That's not news. You're going to be TikTok famous soon, aren't you, George?
That's the plan. It's a big commitment, though, isn't it? Like,
do you do TikTok, Hish?
We have it for the podcast. But yeah, I think, George, if you're going down that path, just sort of brace yourself with the comments. The comment section is pretty brutal on that platform.
Yeah, I'm overweight. They can say what they want. I'm comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, they'll say all sorts, mate. So be prepared.
I'm waiting to look at it. Block it out.
We've had some pretty funny comments.
Over.
What's that?
Some comments over. I just want
nice. Yeah, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for. So thank you, Hish, so much for joining us. I love the routes that we've been down and the stuff that we've explored. And I love what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I know that our listeners will benefit from talking to you if you're interested in looking up Hishem Azzouz. Where can they find you? LinkedIn?
Yeah, that'll be the best place, yeah.
And hopefully you'll come back and we can catch up with you again soon, and it won't be so long next time.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you, Hishem.
Thank
you, George.
Hello, I'll see you in Melbourne.
Yes, you will. See you in Melbourne.
See you in Melbourne.
Well, that's another episode of Retrain Search, the podcast in the bag. Thanks for listening to our wild tales, LinkedIn controversies, and our top tips on how to sell and deliver retained search. Get involved in our next episode. Send in your questions and share your experiences with us by emailing podcast@retrainedsearch.com. And don't be shy. Connect with us on LinkedIn and come and say hi. We don't bite. Unless you're a Shrek firm, that is. We want to say a special thank you to our retrained members for sharing what's working for them right now and innovating new ways to grow and evolve. It's an incredible community. If you're wondering what exactly we mean when we mention our communities, well, we have two separate programs. Our Search Foundations program is for recruiters who want to learn how to sell and deliver retained search solutions consistently. And we have our Search Mastery program. That's for business leaders or owners already at 50% retained or more and looking to scale and grow and structure their search firm. We cap memberships to these programs to protect the integrity of the community. If you want access, just talk to us. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll be back very soon with another episode of Retrain Search, the podcast.